America has a school problem. The thought of public school in America conjures up an image of stressed or disengaged students, tired teachers, and unequal resource distribution. A majority of students have negative feelings towards school, and many students aren't prepared for college after high school. This is a bit concerning, since education is one of the most important investments a country can make in its future, quoted from the Global Partnership for Education. To learn more about why K-12 education isn't living up to expectations, we interviewed a couple students and teachers, as well as an education expert, regarding some of the challenges and issues they have recognized within the American public school system.
I am Dr. Reagan Flowers. I am the founder of C-STEM, Teacher and Student Support Services.
My name is Christy Vieux. I am a sophomore at Brown, and I'm majoring in cognitive science.
Hi, my name is Celine Choi. I am a current sophomore here at Rice University, studying business and finance.
My name is Nicole Johnson Kemp. I am a teacher at Dobie High School. I teach AP Macroeconomics, AP Government and Politics, and on-level economics.
My name is Gerard Bible. I majored in interdisciplinary studies at Prairie View A&M. I love to read, so I thought to myself, what a better subject to teach than it would be reading. So
the problems with the current education system is a very loaded question. I would say that there's a huge disconnect with relevant curriculum and instruction that allows students to see the content and to have opportunities to apply the content, situational, to solve problems. There are issues with funding, under-resourced, underfunded schools. There are issues around having high-quality teachers, teacher leaders, and administrators. I mean, there are just so many challenges that face our education system. And so, it's just not this one underlying issue, but so many issues that we can just speak to. Curriculum is designed by state education agencies. And, with us in Texas specifically, it's the Texas Education Agency. And so they're the watchdog, they're the enforcers and the identifiers of our curriculum and our textbooks and, what's being adopted and what we should teach and how we should teach it, and what are the standardized tests and what's required, and then how do we do the business of teaching and learning.
I find a lot of fault in the curriculum. Curriculum should be kind of specific to communities. The young black male reading is low. They don't like to read. Their scores tend to be lower in reading.
I get to see my advanced placement classes, and the curriculum for those classes are set at college level. So I see the potential of what, if students are given expectations, they can rise to the occasion. The curriculum for on level, I feel like it can be rather lacking, and I think sometimes Texas Education Agency, the curriculum that they set forth, sometimes I feel can be a bit political, which I don't understand why that's even in the classroom.
What I would say in my pre-service teaching, I don't recall ever having an opportunity to think critically about how what I was learning applied to my own life and how what I was expected to teach students to learn and understand would apply to their life or the world around them.
We get so caught up in teaching to the test. Data is all tied to a test. But a lot of those STAR test questions and STAR test passages, they just aren't engaging. They give us the curriculum and these are the books you can choose from. I have to make sure that this is the story that we're reading, this is the story that we're reading. I don't have a lot of, I have some wiggle room in that, but overall, I still have to make sure that they know how to take a test at the end of this,
I feel like I hear a lot of students, hate school, they wish they could just go work and things like that. If we were to make it more relevant to them or even more interesting, to have things that they would find to kind of balance off that you have to take this, I think that might produce a better a student who's more willing to participate in classes.
Yeah, I remember in high school I was a pretty disrespectful student. Not like outrightly, I never like screamed or yelled or anything. I just I was there to get my grades, and I could do that fully by doing assignments and tests. And so during class times I would sleep a lot, to the point where a lot of my teachers thought I had narcolepsy. And then I got into college early decision, and that exacerbated the problem even further.
So one, teachers should have some say in what is taught. They should have some say in how it's taught, particularly if we're saying we're going to take the content and we need to make sure that it's relevant. So if I am, say, in my science class and, I'm going to be teaching something about DNA or something, so I would want to say maybe how the textbook is prescribing I teach DNA. I might want to teach it in a different way, maybe with finally developing or unlocking the code to the human genome, So that is relevant and is in the current research and is something that is a hot topic in the space of education and science and research.
Do you feel that you're being compensated enough for your work?
No. A lot of people think, my salary is compensated for the 9 months that, or, give or take, that I actually teach, but that's not the entire time that I am preparing for, all of my lessons. I'm always trying to make my lessons better, make them easier to understand, or make them more relevant. So I'm always working.
You want to sustain relevant instruction, impactful instruction, we've got to build in real rich opportunities for them to do that.
A rigid curriculum that is only able to meet the needs of a few students reflects the entire structure of the education system itself. In America, by 1920, most states had some sort of compulsory education law, but public schools remained segregated until the ruling of Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. However, today we still see school populations segregated, with there existing majority white schools in one part of a city and black majority schools in another. This is largely due to attendance zoning.
Attendance zone basically is that law or guiding principle that says that your public school, your student is entitled to attend this particular public school based on your geographical location.
When looking at a map of Houston attendance zones, the students who are assigned to the closest elementary school, we can clearly see how zoning affects student school populations. The presence of race-lined neighborhoods in many of our cities is a direct result of discriminatory housing laws from the 1950s and 60s, the effects of which we still see today decades later. Having schools segregated by neighborhood limits student exposure to other cultural and ethnic groups in America and really negatively impacts the educational experience of minority students in public schools.
Our demographic was the white heterosexual Christian. And so I feel like because that was the vast majority of our school, we had access to good resources because those kids are the kids that it was meant for. Like we had good food because it was meant for those kids, and like that's who they really cared about. I was always like watching myself, like on my P's and Q's. And I know one time I ran into a situation where I nearly got in trouble at school. I wasn't feeling good. I called my mom and asked her if she could call the school and let them know I need to go home to go get some medication because our school wasn't allowed to give us medication. Only lived like 5 minutes away. So I knew I was gonna be able to get home and get back to school in time, but I wasn't going to be able to have time to get lunch. So my plan was go home, get the ibuprofen, go to Wendy's, get my lunch, come back to school. Came back to school and I see my two friends standing with the vice principal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get in trouble. And like everything I had feared, it was like it was happening. Vice principals were primarily for like discipline. So he talked to me and told me that I should have went to the office to sign out before leaving. Told him no, I didn't feel good. I showed him the text, or when I texted my mom and she told me she called the school. But he kept reiterating that I was supposed to sign out and he was clearly upset. Then he looked at my profile, and he noticed my address, and he said, "Oh, you live in the Enclave?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I live in, the street next to it. So we're very, very close." When he figured that out, all of a sudden, his whole demeanor changed. He wasn't stern anymore. He even called my mom to confirm with her that she called, and he was talking to her like, "Hey, I live like not too far from you," and blah, blah, blah. For that, it just seemed to me that for the sole reason that I live near him and we're neighbors, I didn't get the discipline, which would have been like a suspension, which I was so afraid of because I had dreams of going to a school like Rice at this time. And I knew that a suspension on my record was not going to help my case if I wanted to apply to college. So what stands out to me the most is that why was that what made you kind of let me go?
East End of Houston may be largely populated with Hispanics. You might say Sunnyside or South Park of Houston, heavily populated with African Americans. And so what do you have? Predominantly African American schools. And then what do you have? You have probably a lot of lower property value, where they're not paying into the property taxes to bring in the income that the schools need to really provide the quality of education that's needed. Or you may have, some higher income communities, and that the property is so high priced that you can't afford to be over there, so you can't get your kid into those schools. And those schools are typically, the high performing schools.
Here's a map of the median household income of each zip code in Houston, where the darker color indicates a higher income. A good chunk of school funding comes from property taxes, with 82% of school funding on a national basis coming from property taxes. However, the percentage varies between states. If property tax is funding an area's schools, then a higher income neighborhood with higher property tax is going to have a more well-funded school. Likewise, a lower income neighborhood is going to have schools struggling to obtain resources. This is exactly what we see.
We're always supposed to be having technology in our lessons, but I don't have the technology available to me because we don't have money.
I went to a high school that was outside of my residential zone. I went to a language magnet high school, so that just meant I had to take a lot of languages. And so the magnet program was fine, and it was lottery based, and so I was quite lucky to get into that program, and it actually really positively impacted my high school experience. The school I was zoned to was definitely worse in terms of just drugs and violence.
If all schools were funded the same, then it wouldn't be this whole idea of I want to go to a better school, because they would all have equal funding and offer, multiple extra classes and things like that because they had the money to do it. And I think that's a big major problem where all schools aren't the same. It's very unfair.
This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to issues plaguing the American public school system. I haven't touched on school gun safety, student food inequality, and the active campaign for historical censorship in schools. Now, the question becomes, how do we fix all of this?
The challenge is, working on education in a way that is nonpartisan, getting past the petty policy disagreements to improve our schools no matter what it takes. Because the root of all issues that we're experiencing, whether it's in Houston, Texas, across America, or the world, it is all rooted in education. When we look at where should we start, where do we begin? It's just a loaded question. I can say it can be with curriculum. I can say it can be with getting high quality teachers in all schools. I can say it can begin with funding. I can say it begins with rethinking attendance zones and boundaries and really speaking to and understanding what are the resources and supports that are needed within these varied boundaries across school districts. Public policy, advocacy work, it's like we can't start in one place. You have to be working on that gear at every lever at the same time. And if we just deal with one thing at a time, then what happens is a stopgap. and then the work can't keep moving. But if we can be working on the various levers of that gear at the same time, I think we can get further ahead and we can see clear results and a clear path as it relates to, where we need to be headed next in public education.
I think at least for my high school in specific, they should really crack down on the GPA inflation / the GPA game, because the more people that become the valedictorian or whatever, the more it loses its meaning.
We needed to have a no tolerance policy for a lot of different things. I know that my school had a no tolerance policy when it came to drugs. They didn't have a no tolerance policy when it came to hateful actions against people, which was clear through the, blackface incidents. There was a time where a gay student at our school was physically assaulted solely because of his sexuality.
Much more funding, and it should be more equal. Just because a person can't afford to live in a certain neighborhood shouldn't give them an equal opportunity in education. A lot of the people that hold positions in the TEA aren't even teachers or never were teachers. That is ridiculous. So they have no education background, but yet they're making decisions about how the school should be run.
I would start with testing first. How beneficial is that? Are we really getting our students prepared for college? I think we leave out applied skills and just comprehensively your mindset. How do you deal with conflict? What goes through your mind when you're making decisions? I'm not sure that the education, how it's set up as it is preparing us for that situation.